Um, we talk so much about AI and big data automating, well, pretty much everything around us. But I want you to imagine for a second where this is all actually heading.
Right.
Picture, like, playing this highly immersive, incredibly detailed open world video game. The graphics are stunning. The non-player characters are reacting to your every move. But there's this one massive catch.
Your controller isn't actually plugged in.
Exactly. Your controller is totally unplugged. The game is basically playing itself, optimizing your character's path, dodging obstacles for you, and finishing missions while you just sit there on the couch. You have no actual controls. You're just a spectator in a simulation of your own life.
Yeah, that sensation of losing the controller is a profoundly accurate way to describe where a purely data-driven, heavily automated society ultimately leads us.
It's a little terrifying.
It really is. We're looking at an impending reality where human agency is slowly, kind of imperceptibly restricted by systems that are designed to optimize us rather than empower us.
And so the looming question for you listening right now is this, as these systems get increasingly sophisticated, is this actually making society better, or is it making it significantly worse?
Right, the big question.
Yeah, the massive, somewhat intimidating question we're tackling in today's deep dive. We're looking at a really fascinating project proposal out of ETH Zurich, led by researcher Dirk Helbing, called 4BETTER.
Yeah, the 4BETTER project.
And the mission here is to explore how we can completely flip the script on technology. Like, how do we take systems that currently isolate and manipulate us and instead use them to build a digital upgrade for democracy itself?
Well, to really grasp how ambitious this 4BETTER project is, we have to fundamentally alter how we view society.
Okay, how so?
The research suggests we really shouldn't just look at populations as, traditional crowds of people anymore. We are now what complexity science calls socio-technical or techno-social systems.
Techno-social systems, so blending the human and the tech.
Exactly. We aren't just biological humans walking around anymore. We're humans extended, connected, and heavily influenced by digital technology. And when you mix complex human psychology with these omnipresent algorithms, you start to see what they call emergent collective behaviors.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Emergent collective behaviors. I mean, a great historical example of that would probably be the early days of social media, right?
Absolutely. Perfect example.
Because, the platforms were originally built with a seemingly harmless, even positive goal: connect college students, let people share photos of their lunch, whatever.
Right. Nobody explicitly sat down and wrote a line of code that said, generate massive echo chambers and political polarization.
Right. But when you threw millions of human psychologies into a system that rewarded rapid emotional reactions, the emergent behavior was, well, the spawning of a highly polarized post-truth landscape.
Yeah.
The behavior just emerged from the interaction between the humans and the tech.
It's the classic unintended side effect of a complex system. And before we can genuinely talk about upgrading democracy, we have to understand the mechanics of why our current techno-social systems are trapping us in the first place.
Right.
Currently, major tech platforms are pouring just vast resources into building highly detailed digital twins of every single person.
And since most of you listening are already pretty familiar with how pervasive data tracking is, we don't need to dwell on the boring mechanics of, like, cookies or smartwatch telemetry.
No, the concerning part here is the actual application of those digital twins.
Yeah, what are they doing with them?
Well, the goal of rendering these hyper-detailed avatars is definitely not to help you self-actualize or achieve your personal goals.
Shocker.
Right. It's to predict your behavior and figure out the most mathematically effective ways to manipulate you through micro-targeting.
Which fundamentally atomizes society, doesn't it?
It does. It isolates you into your own personalized algorithmic feed, which, makes you infinitely easier to influence. And over time, the mathematical models in the 4BETTER research show that this continuous micro-targeting actually narrows the overall spectrum of opinions in a society.
Wow, so it systematically destroys cognitive diversity.
Exactly. Because the algorithms currently governing our digital lives are almost always trying to optimize for a single one-dimensional metric.
Usually something like engagement or click-through rate.
Yeah. And when you optimize a complex, multi-layered system for a single goal function like that, it almost universally promotes average or entirely selfish individual behavior.
Which is terrible for everyone else.
On a societal scale, that leads straight to a tragedy of the commons. Short-term individual optimization entirely ruins the long-term collective good.
It's kind of like It's like we've built a super advanced GPS system for society, right? But instead of asking where we actually want to go, it decides the optimal destination for everyone is the nearest fast food drive-through simply because it generates the highest economic friction.
That is a great way to put it.
And then it subtly alters the digital road signs and the traffic lights to make sure we all end up there without even realizing we were being steered.
Right. And what's fascinating here is the alternative, the 4BETTER project, proposes to that exact scenario.
Yeah.
They introduce a concept called value-sensitive design.
Value-sensitive design. Okay. What does that look like?
Instead of letting the technology govern us by optimizing for those opaque corporate metrics, we explicitly design the algorithms from the ground up to align with fundamental human rights and sustainable development goals.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the underlying code should be engineered to actively preserve human agency, freedom, and diversity, rather than just treating us as variables to be minimized or maximized in some optimization equation.
So if the core problem is this top-down, surveillance-based optimization, the solution has to start from the absolute bottom. Like, it has to change how we gather our data in the first place.
That is the foundational layer of this whole digital upgrade. The project advocates for a drastic shift away from covert data extraction toward what they call participatory data science.
Yeah, there was a great example from the sources on this citizen science workshop called Know the Air You Breathe.
Oh, yeah, I love this example.
Instead of the city government just installing proprietary black box air quality sensors everywhere and hoarding all the data on some private municipal server somewhere.
This is usually what happens.
Exactly. Instead of that, citizens actually co-design low-cost, open-source environmental sensors. So you customize the parameters for your own neighborhood, you deploy them, and you collectively manage the data.
And that process entirely rewires the relationship between the citizen and the technosocial system. It transforms people from passive subjects to active data stewards. But gathering the data is really only step one. Once we have this transparent community-owned data, the project proposes a massive shift to participatory innovation. And they intend to accomplish this using a concept called remixing.
Remixing. Okay, when we hear remixing, we usually think of like a DJ mashing up two songs or some viral TikTok audio trend.
Sure.
But here, we're talking about a decentralized, scalable peer production process for civic policy.
Yes, think about how open source software is built on platforms like GitHub.
Okay, so a developer writes a piece of code to solve a specific problem.
Right, and then another developer comes along, copies that code, modifies it to fix a bug, and releases a new version. They improve upon the idea completely without destroying the original code.
And the 4BETTER project wants to apply that exact open source mechanism to physical social problems and policy ideas.
Exactly. Let's look at a practical example. Say a city proposes a basic blueprint for a new public park.
Okay.
Under the remixing model, citizens take that digital blueprint and branch it off. So one community group remixes the proposal by adding a skate park.
Nice.
Then an environmental group takes that remixed version and adds solar-powered lighting. Another group modifies it further to include a community garden.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. But wait, let me push back on this for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
If everyone in a city is just throwing their own remixed ideas into the pot, pulling a single park policy in like 10,000 different directions, doesn't that just create pure administrative chaos?
That sounds like it would, yeah.
Like, how is handing the steering wheel to thousands of competing interests practically better than just letting a team of educated urban planners sit in a room and design one solid, cohesive park?
It's a totally valid concern, and it really strikes at the heart of how we view human complexity. Experts and traditional planners often fall into the trap of reductive metrics.
What do you mean by reductive metrics?
They try to map complex, contradictory human needs to a single number or a one-size-fits-all solution,
Right.
which, usually ends up being a compromise that nobody truly loves.
Right, because human societies are wildly diverse.
Exactly. So remixing doesn't create chaos. It amplifies diversity, leading to a much richer, more robust array of potential solutions.
So the sheer volume of ideas is actually a feature, not a bug.
The goal of remixing isn't to quickly narrow down to one perfect answer to appease some bureaucratic timeline. The goal is to escape the trap of the average. If you limit the inputs to a few experts, you limit the possible futures.
I hear that, but practically speaking, if we have this massive remixed pool of thousands of diverse policy ideas for, say, one city block, how do we actually make sense of them?
Right.
Because we can't all read 10,000 park proposals.
Hmm.
If we want to avoid that descent into chaos, we have to fundamentally rethink how crowds make decisions, right?
Yes. Most people are familiar with the concept of the wisdom of crowds, often called collective intelligence.
Like guessing the weight of the cow at the fair.
Exactly, the classic illustration. If you ask 1,000 random people to guess the weight of a cow at a county fair, and you average their guesses together, that average is usually incredibly accurate.
It frequently beats the guess of the local butcher.
Yeah, because the individual errors, the people who guess way too high and the people who guess way too low, they cancel each other out mathematically.
But there's a crucial limitation there, isn't there?
A huge one. That mechanism works beautifully for finding an objective fact, like a weight.
Right.
But political preferences, community needs, societal values, these are not objective facts.
Hmm.
They involve highly subjective personal situations, cultural backgrounds, individual tastes.
So if you try to simply average everyone's opinion on a complex social policy, you don't arrive at a hidden truth.
No, you arrive at a bland, mediocre compromise.
It's like trying to find the best restaurant in a city by taking everyone's favorite food and blending it together in a food processor.
Doc.
You end up with like a lukewarm bowl of potato tofu pizza soup. Nobody actually wants to eat that, even though it technically represents the average desire of the entire city.
Which is exactly why the 4BETTER project introduces a vital evolution beyond collective intelligence, and they call it connective intelligence.
Connective intelligence. Okay, let's break down how that functions differently.
So connective intelligence relies heavily on methods from network science, specifically a tool called community detection.
Community detection.
Yeah, it analyzes the broader social network and identifies clusters of people. These are communities that share common interests, pressing needs, or specific causes.
Okay.
And instead of averaging all those distinct clusters together into one mediocre policy soup, connective intelligence evaluates the remixed solutions based on what serves these specific clusters best.
So the goal is to find a synergistic mix of complementary solutions.
Exactly. Instead of building one giant average park for everyone, maybe we implement a combination of 3 different remix policies, like a smaller park here, a dedicated skate plaza there, and a community garden elsewhere. Policies that specifically fit the distinct needs of these cohesive groups.
I have to challenge that approach, though.
Okay, lay it on me.
If we just cluster people by their distinct interests and then cater policies specifically to those clusters, aren't we just building better, more efficient echo chambers?
I see what you're saying.
Like, if the skate park kids only advocate for the skate park and the garden people only advocate for the garden, how does this not just divide society further into isolated factions that only care about getting what they want?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the secret to avoiding factionalism lies in the architecture of the network itself. In a healthy techno-social system, these clusters are never completely isolated.
Right.
Network scientists look for what they call sparse connections or weak ties.
Weak ties meaning like a skater who happens to have a grandmother in the garden club.
Precisely. They are the bridges between dense clusters. Connective intelligence doesn't cater to isolated groups in a vacuum. It uses structural deliberation to make these different cluster-specific solutions mutually compatible.
Oh, I get it. So it searches for areas where remixed proposals overlap through those weak ties.
Yes. It actively looks for ways the different groups can solve each other's problems. The framework explicitly aims to foster serendipity and benevolence across the entire network.
Right.
Using your example, perhaps the skate park design creates excess rainwater runoff, and the community garden desperately needs a water collection system.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Connective intelligence highlights how fulfilling one group's need can synergistically help another group, rather than forcing everyone to fight over the same limited plot of land.
The logic is brilliant. I mean, we have diverse remixed ideas. We know we need complementary solutions for different network clusters, and we are looking for those synergistic weak ties.
Exactly.
But bringing this back to reality for a second, the human brain still cannot read, comprehend, and cross-reference thousands of remixed proposals to figure out those complex synergies.
No, it can't. And this is exactly where artificial intelligence re-enters our story.
There you go.
However, it returns not as a top-down micro-targeting manipulator, but as a transparent democratic tool. The researchers refer to this paradigm as hybrid intelligence.
So we're talking about utilizing large language models, or LLMs.
Yes, the project proposes using LLMs, to process these massive volumes of public debate, read through the thousands of remixed ideas, and summarize the core arguments for the human participants.
But it goes much deeper than just generating a basic text summary, right?
It does. The researchers propose utilizing a machine learning technique called few-shot learning, combined with anonymized demographic data.
Few-shot learning.
Yeah, it's a method where you feed an AI model a very small, specific handful of examples, maybe just a few transcripts of how a certain neighborhood committee discusses housing.
Okay.
And from just those few examples, the LLM learns to accurately simulate that specific group's perspective, priorities, and communication style. The project uses this to create personas.
Oh, okay. So a persona is essentially a digital representation of what matters most to certain demographic clusters or interest groups.
Exactly.
It's kind of like a specialized version of a digital twin, but used for understanding group dynamics rather than manipulating an individual.
That's spot on. And these persona LLM agents can then run complex simulations of how proposed projects might play out. They can highlight which remixed policies align best with your specific community's values.
That is wild.
Furthermore, when combined with network science visualization tools, the LLMs can map out the entire landscape of the civic debate.
They draw a literal visual map of the arguments.
Yes.
So instead of scrolling endlessly through some toxic community forum or reading a massive PDF document, a citizen can just look at a graphical map.
Much easier to digest.
They can see the bigger picture, visually identify where the contrasting viewpoints are clustered, and physically see the lines connecting where the potential synergies lie between different groups.
It's a game changer for civic engagement.
But wait, what does this all mean for you, the listener? Are we basically saying the future of democracy is delegating our voting rights to our AI personas?
Oh, absolutely not.
Like, can I just take a nap on election day while my AI twin debates your AI twin in the cloud, and they just push a notification to our phones telling us what the new laws are when we wake up?
The researchers are incredibly firm on this point. Absolutely not. Allowing AI to cast votes or enact policy would entirely violate the core value of human agency that the 4BETTER project is built upon.
Okay, phew.
Yeah. The LLMs are strictly bounded. They are designed exclusively to be mediators and summarizers. They are tools for augmentation, not substitution.
So they do the heavy lifting of reading, sorting, and mapping, so we have the mental bandwidth to do the inherently human work of deciding.
Precisely. They help us understand each other's complex viewpoints better and facilitate constructive deliberation across those network clusters.
Right.
The project strongly warns against the catastrophic pitfalls of letting LLMs make human life or death decisions. The human must always remain in the driver's seat. The AI just, clears the fog off the windshield.
I love that analogy. But mapping out arguments with AI is great for debate, but eventually talk has to turn into action.
It does.
When it comes time to actually spend tax dollars or divide up scarce resources, how does this system prevent the majority from just taking everything?
Right, the tyranny of the majority.
Because to prove this isn't just a bunch of theoretical AI philosophy happening in a Swiss lab, the 4BETTER project actually explores how these tools are deployed in the real world to change how we vote.
Yes, because the traditional winner-take-all voting method is fundamentally outdated for a complex, pluralistic society.
It really is.
It creates massive systemic disenfranchisement because 51% of the population can essentially dictate 100% of the resources. So the project tests out new, mathematically rigorous democratic mechanisms like the method of equal shares.
The method of equal shares. Okay, let's break down how the math of this actually works for the listener.
Sure. Imagine a city is doing participatory budgeting. The deep dive sources highlight a real-world project called Statity in Aarau, Switzerland, where citizens directly vote on how to allocate a portion of the public budget to community projects. Under the method of equal shares, instead of just casting one vote for one project, imagine every single citizen is given an equal number of digital tokens representing their share of the city budget, say 100 tokens each.
Okay, so I have my 100 tokens.
When a project is approved, it only drains tokens from the specific people who voted for it.
Oh, interesting.
So if you vote for a massive, expensive stadium and it passes, a huge chunk of your tokens are spent. You have less influence over the rest of the budget.
But if I vote for a cheap community garden, I only spend a few tokens.
Exactly.
So the 51% majority can't just fund all their own pet projects because they will quickly run out of their allotted tokens.
That's the beauty of it. The math forces the system to look further down the list and fund a wider variety of projects supported by minority groups until everyone's tokens are proportionally spent.
Wow.
It mathematically ensures that we actually get those complementary synergistic solutions we talked about earlier, rather than the majority taking the whole pie.
That is so smart. And looking even further into the future, the project wants to use virtual reality and augmented reality to test out these participatory experiments, right? Specifically regarding how we handle scarce resources during a crisis.
Yes, and this represents a crucial ethical upgrade to how we view technology. You might have heard of the famous moral machine experiment in AI.
Yeah, the zero-sum triage experiment, where you program a self-driving car to choose who lives and who dies in an unavoidable crash.
Right.
Like, do you hit the elderly pedestrians or the younger
It's
pedestrians?
an ethically grim, forced choice, zero-sum game. And the 4BETTER project wants to replace that authoritarian triage mindset with collaborative resource sharing.
Okay, how do they do that in VR?
They propose putting citizens into a virtual community facing a shortage of something vital, say a severe water drought or a lack of medical supplies.
Oh.
But instead of voting on who gets cut off, the citizens use the VR space to collaborate. They allocate resources based on a multi-criteria framework, assessing basic needs, rewarding effort, and utilizing innovative sharing mechanisms like time banking.
We should probably quickly define time banking for those unfamiliar.
Oh, sure.
Instead of trading traditional currency, people trade hours of labor. So if you spend an hour fixing your neighbor's plumbing, you earn a time credit that you can spend having another neighbor tutor your kid for an hour.
Exactly. It creates a parallel economy based on mutual aid rather than financial wealth. And running these scenarios in VR is completely revolutionary.
It's like a multiplayer flight simulator for society.
Yes.
Instead of waiting for a real-world crisis to realize our distribution system is broken, we can put on a VR headset, test out new democratic voting rules like equal shares or time banking, and physically see how a policy affects our virtual city and our virtual neighbors in real time.
And this raises a really important question. One, the VR experiments are uniquely suited to answer, do people even perceive the same city in the same way?
What do you mean?
Well, the physical infrastructure of a street might be identical, but the lived experience is completely different depending on your mobility, your age, or your cultural background.
Oh, right. If you are in a wheelchair, a city street looks fundamentally different than it does to someone on a bicycle.
Absolutely. By using VR to let citizens literally walk through proposed policy changes from different perspectives, the project aims to quantify the diversity of those lived experiences.
That is so powerful.
It proves that a participant-centered, collaborative economy, one that truly understands how different people experience the physical world, is vastly more resilient than some authoritarian, algorithmically controlled approach to scarcity.
We've covered some incredible ground today. We started with the very real impending dangers of being atomized and manipulated by micro-targeted digital twins.
Yeah.
But we've seen how we can flip that script by democratizing our data through community sensors, amplifying our diverse ideas through open source remixing, and using connective intelligence to find synergistic weak ties between groups.
All of it working together.
We can use LLMs as facilitators to visually map our complex debates without surrendering our agency and test out entirely new mathematically fair voting methods in VR before we build them in reality. The ultimate goal here is a digital society that doesn't just optimize us for clicks, but actually unleashes the knowledge and the co-creation of its citizens.
It is a profound, necessary shift in our technological trajectory.
It reminds us that the automation of society isn't a foregone conclusion that we just have to passively accept. The diverse perspective that you, the listener, bring to the table isn't an error in the algorithm to be smoothed over. Your unique perspective is the actual engine of this new connective intelligence.
I'd really like to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on the project's focus on emergent collective behaviors. We know all too well that poorly designed algorithms can cause polarized echo chambers to emerge. But if we successfully design this beautifully diverse, highly participatory techno-social system where AI summarizes our views without replacing our judgment, and VR helps us empathetically test collaborative policies, what completely new, unexpected emergent behaviors will arise from that environment? If isolated crowds can be manipulated into madness, what entirely new, elevated psychology will a hybrid intelligent society develop when it finally learns to think together?
Wow, that's an incredible thought. It turns out you don't have to just be a spectator in the simulation of your own life. With the right digital upgrades, we can all step out of the audience, pick up the controller, and start designing the game ourselves.